You guys, I never thought I'd see the day growing up. The big house was like this untouchable castle on the hill. Uncle Jim Bob was the king, and let's be real, money was his scepter. He used it to control everything, who dated, who lived where, and who stayed quiet. But look at the headlines today. For sale signs popping up on prime real estate. Commercial lots being dumped for quick cash. The rumor mill in Northwest Arkansas is absolutely buzzing. And for the first time, it's not about a wedding or a baby. It's about the one thing Jim Bob loves almost as much as his reputation, his fortune. Is the money finally running out? Did the legal battles drain the well dry? And the biggest question of all, if the money is gone, what happens to the control he has over my cousins? I've promised to always speak the truth, even when it shakes the family tree. So grab your tea because we are diving deep into the crumbling of the Duggar empire. Is this karma? Let's find out. Let's get right into the receipts, shall we? If you drive around Springdale right now, you might notice something interesting. Uncle Jim Bob's name, or at least the LLCs he hides behind, is all over the for sale listings. We aren't talking about selling an old used car lot. We are talking about prime acreage, massive commercial properties, things that were supposed to be generational wealth. When you see a real estate investor like him selling off assets that quickly, usually below market value, it screams one thing: liquidity crisis. He needs cash and he needs it yesterday. I've heard whispers from locals that deals are happening fast and quiet. It's not the confident business moves we saw 10 years ago when the TLC checks were clearing every week. This feels frantic. It feels like he's trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship with land deeds. And honestly, it's shocking. This is a man who prided himself on being the smartest guy in the room when it came to money. Seeing him scramble like this, it shifts the whole power dynamic in the town. You guys remember the old catchphrase, right? Buy used and save the difference. It was plastered everywhere. They built their whole brand on being thrifty, dumpster diving for furniture, and feeding an army on pennies. But here is the tea. Once the TV money started rolling in, buying used became a brand, not a necessity. Behind the scenes, the cash flow was massive. We are talking millions of dollars a year from the show, speaking engagements, books. It was an empire. But looking back, I wonder how much of that was actually saved and how much was tied up in assets to maintain control. Jim Bob didn't just put money in a savings account, he bought things. He bought houses for the kids to live in so he could hold the keys. He bought cars for them to drive so he could take them away. The wealth was real, but it was leveraged. And now that the income stream has stopped, that buy used mentality might have to become their reality again. It's ironic, isn't it? The slogan that made them famous might be the only advice they have left. We have to talk about the elephant in the room, their trial. I'm not going to get into the gruesome details of what Josh did. We all know, and it makes me sick. But from a financial standpoint, that defense was astronomical. We are talking about top tier federal defense attorneys, expert witnesses, investigators. That kind of legal team doesn't accept thrift store coupon. They want cash and they want a lot of it. I've seen estimates that the family spent nearly $1 million, maybe more, trying to keep him out of prison. $1 million just gone, burned to defend the indefensible. Think about that drain on a bank account. Even for a wealthy family, that is a massive hit. And for what? He's in jail. The money was wasted. Uncle Jim Bob threw good money after bad to protect his golden child. And I truly believe that was the beginning of the financial end. You can't bleed that kind of cash without feeling the side effects eventually. People forget that for over a decade, the Duggar family was basically a small corporation funded by one massive client, TLC. That network paid for the weddings, the honeymoons, the renovations, everything. And the check was written to one person, Jim Bob. When Counting On was finally canceled, thank God, it wasn't just a show ending. It was the main artery of their income being severed. We aren't talking about losing a few $1,000s. We are talking about losing millions annually. Suddenly, there is no network budget to pay for the giant grocery hauls or the travel. That money stopped cold. And knowing Uncle Jim Bob, I doubt he had a backup plan that didn't involve being on TV. He thought they were invincible. He thought the fame would last forever. But when the world finally saw the truth and turned away, the cash flow dried up. And I think that panic is exactly what we are seeing play out right now. Here is the thing about the Duggar dynamic that you have to understand. Money wasn't just currency, it was a leash. Jim Bob used his wealth to keep my cousins, his own adult children, under his thumb. You want a house? Daddy will buy it, but it stays in his name. You want a car? Daddy will lease it, but he keeps the keys if you disobey. It was a brilliant, twisted system. If you don't have your own credit history, your own job, or your own bank account, you can't leave. You can't speak out. You are trapped. He built a world where his approval was the only way to survive financially. But now, if the money is gone, the leash snaps. If he can't dangle a free house in front of the boys, what power does he actually have left? Watching that control slip away must be his worst nightmare, but honestly, it's the best thing that could happen to those kids. Have you ever really looked at the big house? It's massive. It's basically a hotel, and hotels are expensive to run. You have industrial kitchens, commercial grade utilities, property taxes on that massive compound. The overhead is insane. When the cameras were rolling, TLC probably covered a lot of those production costs, but now keeping the lights on in a 7,000 square foot mansion when you don't have a production company footing the bill is a whole different ball game. I bet the utility bill alone is more than most people make in a month. And remember, it's not just the house, it's the fleet of cars, the planes, the heavy machinery. It's an infrastructure built for a reality TV empire that no longer exists. It's a money pit, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that for sale sign pop up at the main gate sooner rather than later. Let's talk about the contracts. For years, there have been rumors that anyone who married into the family or worked for them had to sign their life away. Silence was bought and paid for. But NDAs are tricky things. Usually, there is a settlement or a payment attached to keeping your mouth shut. If the money runs out, do the contracts hold up? If Jim Bob can't pay the hush money anymore, what stops someone from writing a tell all book? What stops a son in law from giving an interview? That's the danger of building your reputation on paid silence. The moment the check bounces, the truth comes out. And believe me, there is a lot of truth waiting to be told in that family. I'm just the one loud cousin who didn't sign anything. But imagine what the ones who lived there could say. We have to give credit to Jill. My cousin Jill was the first one to really stand up and say, wait a minute, where is my money? She and Derek had to literally sue threaten legal action just to get paid for the hours of their lives they gave to that show. That was the first crack in the dam. When Jill realized she was working free while her dad was stacking millions, it woke everyone up. It showed the other kids that daddy wasn't managing their money for their benefit. He was hoarding it for his. That lawsuit forced Jim Bob to pay out a lump sum, which definitely hurt his wallet. But more importantly, it hurt his ego. It proved that he could be challenged. Jill walked away with her dignity and eventually her fair share. And now, seeing the financial chaos unfold, she looks smarter than ever for getting her money out when she did. Jim Bob loves to act like he's this real estate genius, the Trump of Arkansas or whatever. But let's look at the track record. Not every deal was a winner. In fact, there were some massive flops that they kept very quiet. I remember hearing about properties that sat vacant for years, eating up taxes, or house flips that went way over budget because they were trying to cut corners with cheap labor. My cousins, when you have free labor, you get sloppy results. I think a lot of his wealth was tied up in these speculative assets that looked good on paper, but weren't actually generating cash. Now that the market is shifting and he needs liquid money, he's realizing that a rusty airplane hangar or a plot of land in the middle of nowhere isn't exactly an ATM. The genius investor facade is cracking, and we are seeing the bad bets come to light. The biggest tell, the planes. For a while, the Duggars were flying private, or at least Duggar private, in their own little fleet of planes everywhere. It was their ultimate flex. Look at us. We don't wait in TSA lines. But lately, I've seen them spotting flying commercial, economy class, middle seats. That might sound normal to you and me, but for Jim Bob, that is a humiliation. That is admitting defeat. Fuel for private planes is expensive. Maintenance is expensive. When you start cutting back on the toys, you know the bank account is hurting. We aren't seeing the big family vacations to international destinations anymore either. It's back to Silver Dollar City and camping trips. The billionaire lifestyle is shrinking back down to a budget reality. And where is Aunt Michelle in all of this? Silent, as always. But you have to wonder what she's thinking. She signed up for this life of submission, trusting that Jim Bob would provide. For years, providing meant a life of ease, fame, and comfort. Now that the walls are closing in, is she worried, or is she just smiling and signing whatever deed he puts in front of her? I feel for her in a way because she has no autonomy. If he sinks the ship, she goes down with it. She has no career, no separate assets, no exit strategy. Her silence isn't peaceful to me. It feels terrifying. She's watching her husband gamble away their security, and she probably feels like she can't say a single word to stop him. This financial mess hits the golden boys the hardest. I'm talking about Jed, Jer, Jason, the ones who stayed close, followed the rules, and got on the payroll. They built their whole lives around daddy's business. They work for his construction company. They live in his houses. They run for office using his connections. If Jim Bob goes broke, they lose their jobs, their homes, and their safety net overnight. They don't have degrees. They don't have outside experience. They put all their eggs in the Jim Bob basket. I honestly worry for them. They were promised a kingdom if they were loyal, but it looks like they might inherit a mountain of debt instead. It's a harsh wake up call that loyalty to a man doesn't pay the bills forever. On the flip side, look at the ones who got out. Jinger and Jeremy in California, they are thriving. They have their own brand, their own contracts, their own money. Jill and Derek have a real law income. Even Joy and Austin are flipping houses on their own terms. The cousins who cut the financial cord are the ones who are safe right now. They aren't panicking about Jim Bob selling a lot in Springdale because their mortgage doesn't depend on it. It proves that independence was the right choice all along. Jim Bob tried to make them fear the world, telling them they couldn't make it without him. Well, look at them now. They are the ones standing tall while his empire crumbles. Karma has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? Have you ever wondered where Uncle Jim Bob actually kept all that money? There are long-standing rumors that a massive chunk of his earnings was funneled directly into the IBLP, the organization that stood at the very center of their lives. But now, as the organization faces its own decline and mounting legal pressures, is that money even recoverable? Many believe he used religious donations as a way to hide assets for a rainy day. But those organizations are under the microscope now. If Jim Bob truly invested his life's work into that system, his chances of getting it back are slim to none. It's not just a financial collapse, it's the total failure of the system he put all his faith in. A Jim Bob now has over 30 grandchildren. Just think about how expensive it is to support a dynasty of that size. He always wanted to build this massive empire where everyone was financially dependent on him. But now that the primary income stream has vanished, how can he possibly maintain that level of responsibility? Buying houses for every child or funding the lives of dozens of grandkids is simply impossible now. I think he's finally realizing that while his family is growing, his resources are shrinking. This grandchild problem is a huge reason why we're seeing these desperate property sales. Building a dynasty is easy when you're on TV, but sustaining it in the real world is a different story. Business runs on trust and reputation. In Northwest Arkansas, the Duggar name used to be a gold standard for reliability. But after the scandals of the last few years, especially everything with Josh, that name is now radioactive. Local business people are terrified to be associated with the Duggar brand. Who wants their company linked to a family with that kind of baggage? This reputation cost is what's truly crippling him financially. Prime deals are falling through, and I'm sure getting bank loans has become a nightmare. Money can be made back, but a destroyed reputation is almost impossible to fix. Jim Bob is essentially being declared bankrupt by the court of public opinion. I've always been part of this family, yet I've always lived on the outside. My mom, Deanna, made sure I was raised with freedom. We weren't part of the cult, and we didn't live by those suffocating rules. When I watched my cousins living in that mansion and flying in private planes, there were moments where I wondered if they were the lucky ones. But seeing them struggle for independence now, while Jim Bob scrambles to save his pride, makes me realize I was the wealthy one all along. My little bit was truly mine. Jim Bob's wealth was just a gilded cage. Today, that cage is falling apart, and I'm just here to make sure the door stays open for anyone who wants to leave. The speed at which these properties are being listed isn't a strategy, it's a panic. Uncle Jim Bob is likely caught in a massive debt trap or facing a legal settlement that requires immediate, cold, hard cash. Dumping 3 or 4 major commercial assets in a single month means your back is against the wall. He probably thinks he can sell his way out of this crisis, But when a ship starts taking on water this fast, throwing a few gold bars overboard isn't going to save it. These sales are proof that the situation is far more dire than they are letting on. It's the beginning of the final act. Uh, I know I'm being blunt, but this financial collapse might actually be the best thing to ever happen to my cousins. Why? Because without the money, the control disappears. When Jim Bob can no longer bribe them with houses or cars, they will be forced to find their own way. They will finally learn what it's like to breathe fresh air and make their own choices. Poverty might lead them to their ultimate freedom if the Duggar Empire has to burn down for the Duggar children to be saved. Then let it burn. That would be the most beautiful ending this story could ever have. The future of the Duggar family isn't on a TV screen anymore. Those days are gone forever. The future belongs to the ones like Jill and Jinger who chose their own path. Jim Bob might end up in a small house with nothing but his memories, but the ego will finally be gone. We're going to see them living like normal people, and honestly, that's where they belong. The truth always wins in the end. I promise you, I won't stop talking until the full story is told. Will the Duggar name be remembered for the scandals or for the strength of the kids who survived them? Only time will tell. Thank you for sticking with me through this. I'll see you in the next update.